Okay, guys, nice to have you on the show. We are back with another Let's Chat About session, this time about the Zelda timeline. Let's go ahead and go down for introductions, starting at the top again, this time starting with the Bread Pirate.
Hey, my name is the Bread Pirate. I am a Zelda YouTuber, much like all the other fine gents that are here, and I focus on Zelda history and fun facts related to the series.
Cool. Dr. Wily.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Wily. I'm an ex-Mega Man villain. I got kicked out of the League of Evil because I wasn't good enough. So now I make better Zelda videos. They've gotten better, actually. Last time I said it was like a 6, maybe 6.5. I'd give it a 7.5 now. I've gotten pretty good.
Good job.
Oh, we're still doing the ranking thing. I forgot.
Nice.
I'll give myself like 5 out of 10. I'm doing hot. I'm still doing okay. Average.
Nice.
Hyrule Gamer.
Hello, I'm Adam, also known as Hyrule Gamer. I also make Zelda videos. Surprise, surprise. Mostly theories, ideas, mysteries, the occasional countdown list. And I forgot why I rated my videos last time, but I'm going to go ahead and say 7 this time.
Oh,
We're getting there.
I'm Pixel Fusion Portraits, also Cornelius Belmont, and, I make Zelda videos like everybody else here. I'm going to rate mine. They've gone up in quality, especially with the collab with Zelda My Dead. So I'm going to put mine at, I feel like it's probably about a 7, probably more like 6.5. Then we have Zelda Lore.
Hey, I'm Soldalo, and like my name suggests, I cover all related to Soldalo, from characters, locations, races, the history of the games, and I also do some occasional theories here and there.
Cool.
And as for my rating, I rather not say anything. I let people rate my channel.
You're so humble. Okay. And also, I just want to bring up for the people watching that Zeldum is, he may be joining us later. He might be running late. Not sure what's going on, but he's planned to be a part of this. With that being said, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say his Loftwing is probably just getting into, I don't know, some trouble or something here or there. You know how it is. The traffic nowadays in the skies, it's just awful.
Ooh,
It's got in a storm.
I just got a I just got a really fun bonus question for all of us. Well, what color is your Loftwing? Go, Bread.
Oh gosh darn. I'm going to go with green. Nice dark green with probably red accents, maybe in the cloth or feathers.
I want mine. Mine needs to be. The last one I had, I lost. It got shot down by a rocket when I flew over American airspace. They don't like it much. So the next one I'm gonna get is going to be some sort of like fluorescent purple, because that really, they'll see it when I come. America will be like, oh my god, he's back again, and then hopefully they won't shoot me down again, because they're like, well, this time we see him, so it's less scary.
I was going to say purple, but because I don't want to copy anyone, I'm going to go for blue and white, just because the Scotland flag, and I'm from there, so blue and white it is.
I think I'm going to go with my usual coloring, which is boring, red and black. The goth one.
Hey, nonsense, that's still nice.
Zelda Lord?
I would go with pure white, like a really majestic looking Loftwing.
Oh, well,
Nice.
now you're going to have to clean his feathers all the time. It's going to get dirty really easily.
Yeah.
It's like driving a limousine in the countryside. I mean, think of all the bird poop you're going to get on it.
Ew.
That's true.
Especially with all the air pollution, too.
Oh, yeah, ew.
All right.
Or I would also go with a traditional Crimson Loftwing as well. I really like
That's a
that one
good
too.
pick.
All right. So let's jump into the first question then. Question 1. Do you think the timeline is needed in the series? Go ahead, Bread. This is a big one.
Oh, boy. I changed my name to try and make it easier for people to recognize or like know how to call me. Just say Bread instead of the Bread Pirate. I did not want to necessarily be the person to go first with this question. This is loaded. There's so much to say with this, so I'll try and keep it simple.
Let me just ask really quick. Do you guys think maybe I should randomize the order of how people talk in these chats?
No, blame everything on Bread.
Yeah, just blame me.
He's the front line. He can take the bullets.
Go ahead, Bread.
Yeah, no, okay, so a timeline is a great thing to have, but it's not really the main focus. Each game can be appreciated on their own, individually, for the most part. And some games have connections. For instance, it's very clear that Ocarina of Time leads to Majora's Mask, leads to Twilight Princess, and it's very clear that Wind Waker leads all the way down to Spirit Tracks. So, in a sense, timelines are great, but the word need is a really strong word. We probably could enjoy the Zelda series just as much as we do right now without a timeline, and maybe leaving it to fan interpretation. Mm-hmm. I see it as a cherry on top, so I'll leave it at that, and if somebody says something that I disagree with, I'll probably mention it later.
On that topic, I've talked to many people in the Zelda community lately, thanks to your server, where a lot of people feel like it's not needed. Super Zelda Girl, good YouTuber, of course, she very much expressed to me that she feels it's not needed and feels that it clutters things more than it should. Go ahead, Dr. White.
Yeah, that is a good point, because the Zelda timeline is, if you believe there's only one canon, there's only one timeline that can be accepted, then you're shooting down a lot of potential for creativity and figuring out how the Zelda series could be, worked and clipped together. And I think that's one of the most fun parts, being able to imagine how you can piece together the timeline.
How about you, Dr. Wily?
All right, insert clip of me kicking down door, I guess. The thing is, Nintendo, one day, when Nintendo was thinking, wow, we can all stitch this together and it will be epic. However, Nintendo realized, well, actually they haven't, but they forgot that they can't actually write good stories, and time travel is very complicated. Most Zelda stories are pretty good, but in my opinion, as soon as they bring time travel into the whole story, it starts to get a little bit messy, and you can already see that when you look at the timeline itself. It makes sense to an extent, but there are many, many, many plot holes, especially with the ending of Ocarina of Time and how it's split. The fact that originally in Skyward Sword there was also a split, because in one of the timelines, Demise was defeated by the Triforce, and in another, Girahim went back in time and tried to reverse it all and stuff. So I think we don't need a timeline. I think it's potentially even harmful for the series, and that's mostly because Nintendo can't deal with the complexities that time travel brings. It's a cool mechanic, and it can be used as a nice cop-out, but in my opinion, they haven't really handled it that well, so I would rather get rid of it and everything just floats in its own space.
Right.
Could I ask for clarification on that? So you're trying to say that they might be good at making individual stories for each game, but when they make an overarching story with all of them, it falls through.
Yeah, especially because they start to mess around with time travel and multiple timelines.
Right, so it's only when they're trying to tie games together and they're involving time travel and it's getting confusing that the logic breaks down.
Yeah,
that makes sense in my brain too.
It's basically, they are basically using, they had all the stories and all the different games, and then when they wanted to put it together, they were like, well, darn, how are we going to do this? And so they came up with the idea, wait, we have used time travel before. The perfect scapegoat! Yay!
Yeah,
and so they decided to tie it all together using time travel, which is kind of bad and loose string to tie something together, to be honest.
Right. They seem to want to use time travel as a scapegoat, or not a scapegoat, as a catch-all easy way around linking their continuity or not linking their continuity. And it really gets under my skin. Like, if you're going to write a time travel story, design a time travel story. Don't try to link everything together with branching timelines. I thought there was some nuance with Ocarina of Time, but yeah, especially with Age of Calamity, it gets under my skin. Anyhow.
Yeah.
Adam?
Sorry. I was thinking about what you said. I zoned out.
We're just in such deep thought right here.
Yeah, I was still trying to process all the time travel stuff, because it fries my mind sometimes. But to answer the actual question, I've been conflicted on this ever since, like, I heard you say the question. Straight up, I would say no. If you're talking about generally just straight up, do we need one? No, we don't need one. The games, as I believe it was Brett said it, they work as standalone stories. And the thing is, they have connections in them anyway, which most people would figure out, or it would become common knowledge eventually. But it is a very, very welcome and I'd say helpful thing to have. But the series would survive without it. Plus, fans make their own timelines anyway, so I think if we didn't have one, you'd end up just seeing a bunch of fan timelines, which, in my opinion, might even work better, because I see fan-made timelines. I believe Zelda Lord may have even been a few of them that I've seen.
Yeah.
A lot of them seem more accurate than the one Nintendo provides. So in a way, maybe it would be more healthy for the series if, like, it didn't have one and we just left it to fans to interpret it. As they do with like theories, for example, a lot of them anyway. But I agree it isn't needed, but it is very, very cool.
Zelda lore, if you were feeling up to it, do you think maybe you could drop one of your timeline bits into the
Absolutely.
Maybe
Hold on,
like
let me find it
or whatever. Anyhow,
let me find it. Give me
while you're fishing for that, I'll go ahead and give mine. So,
okay.
Is it needed?
Let me see.
No, but I definitely feel that it is desired. I've been gaming all my life, and I have played the original game roughly around the time when it first came out. And before Ocarina of Time came out, there was speculation that, Zelda 1, 2, Zelda 1 and 2, A Link to the Past, they were directly connected. And the talk of a linear timeline with one Link doing all of these adventures was a heated debate. Eventually, Ocarina of Time came along, added to that, but then Wind Waker came out and definitively showed there's a time split. And, years later, Hyrule Historia comes out and gives us a quote-unquote official timeline. So, is it needed? No, but we're kind of in a boat where it's there, and they can't escape it. Maybe it was a mistake to release it, but it is what it is. What are your thoughts, Zelda lore?
I'm torn between yes and no. And the reason is because ever since Zelda 2, there's always technically been a timeline of events. For example, Zelda 2 was the sequel to Zelda 1. Then we had A Link to the Past being the prequel to Zelda 1, with Link's Awakening being the sequel. So it's always been a sequel and a prequel thing for all the games. Or then, for example, with Four Swords, they said, this is the earliest game in the series when it came out. Then when we got, Minish Cap being the prequel and all that. So I do feel that there is a timeline of events, but the established timeline as we know it, I don't think it's I mean, it's kind of correct, but at the same time, there's a lot of errors. And I do feel that while there is a timeline of events, leaving it kind of open to interpretation is also quite good. Because when writing stories for future games, maybe you can shift the way the timeline works completely, and that leaves like freedom for the person, like the directors of the games and the writers and everything. So I'm kind of torn between those two. I mean, there is a timeline of events because we know, like, for example, Ocarina leads to Majora, or to Wind Waker, and Majora to Twilight Princess. So I'm there. I'm like, yes, but at the same time, it also can work without it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Definitely. It's really confusing when you bring in canonicity. Like, they can make a timeline and say, like, here's our interpretation of it. But when they say it's canon, that's when things get kind of tricky. Because if there's a canon timeline, then all others are instantly null and void. But if there isn't a canon timeline, then there is the ability to have imagination and have all those timelines fans are coming up with be kind of seen on level playing ground.
Well, I mean, it at the end of the day, it really depends on how good the company or the maker in question is at making stories. For example, if you look at Lord of the Rings from Tolkien, all that stuff is put together beautifully because it was all thought out. And the same goes for Harry Potter, for example. That was also thought out and then it was made. The problem I have with it all is that Nintendo tried to make it afterwards, and that doesn't work. Because, for example, a problem you get, for example, is Skyward Sword has an origin story for the Master Sword. That's fun and all, but A Link to the Past also has an origin story for the Master Sword.
And Twilight Princess, which also ties to A Link to the Past.
Yeah, so it's so confusing. They shouldn't have done it.
It can also...
Go ahead.
It can also... The origin of the Master Sword can be written as the sages existing prior to Skyward Sword, because the emblems of the sages exist in the Temple of Hylia, later called the Sealed Temple. Okay, yeah, they do, cool. In the entrance. So they technically existed, so they could have been the ones that forged the Goddess Sword by orders of Hylia, and then you, as the player, temper the Goddess Sword into the Master Sword. You know what I mean?
So actually,
yeah, but isn't that messy?
I want to bring something up regarding the Master Sword that's always bugged me. So Fi's design, I call her Fi, if don't at me. Fi's design is very much based on the concept of the Master Sword. Her stockings have the green crossing on it. She's blue and she's very Master Sword themed. But she's the spirit of the Goddess Sword. So why does Fi look like a later version of the sword if you forged the sword, changed the Goddess Sword through the game? It would have been fine if her appearance changed over the course of the game too. But
I think originally the idea for Fi was for her appearance to change as you upgraded the sword, and I think that later was dropped. I think the original idea that was that, and I think that would have been a really cool concept.
Oh yeah,
I agree. That would have been a really cool concept. I'm disappointed that isn't in.
Can you imagine the scenes when she's engulfed in the fire? If they just subtly morphed her model, that would have looked really nice. Oh well, lost opportunity. That's Nintendo.
Well, you might be able to say, if we could take a small tangent, you might be able to get away with saying that because the Master Sword seems like it's built to be upgraded, that she is a representation of the final form because the sword kind of is ready for a final form, but just hasn't gone through the necessary steps to get there yet.
Maybe.
It's a stretch.
I mean, she does seem very much kind of like an AI program to me, so maybe Hylia created her with that endpoint in mind. I'm sure Zelda would make an argument for that because he's big on the Hylia mastermind approach.
Well, I do find it interesting that when you get the Master Sword, they call it the Legendary Master Sword.
Oh yeah, that sort of implies that it's already been a thing.
Yeah.
Well, it just got degraded over time. Love it when that happens.
It is, because when you take it to the past, it remains in the past for thousands of years, and it's kind of weird.
Oh yeah, their time loop thing. So I dropped a couple of the timelines that I've been playing with on there. And one of them is very heavily based on the idea that there was a timeline split in Skyward Sword simply due to dropping the Master Sword in the past at the end of the game. And it spins into the idea that that Breath of the Wild canon follows from that event. But we can get into that with the next talking point, which is, do you think that the old games are canon to the Breath of the Wild continuity?
Well, I guess that means I'm going again. All right. Yeah, I mean, well, canon is a tricky thing. By definition, canon can only be confirmed or denied by Nintendo. We can only guesstimate, presume, speculate on what Nintendo thinks the canon is. But if we take that word out and we just ask, do we think that the old games are related or play a part in Breath of the Wild? I think the answer has to be yes. We definitely see lots of items and references to these older events. Like, I mean, the Rock Salt references an old sea, and then there's a reference of to the Twilight, and I think there's a reference. There's plenty of references to Skyward Sword in architecture, but I think they mention it during the champion ceremony as well, right?
So
can anybody corroborate that, or am I going crazy?
So
yeah, no, they do.
Okay, they do. Yeah, there are definitely references to the era of myth, which is what these older games are called. It's just a very weak connection. It's indirect. So, yeah, but not much. That's my answer.
Okay. How about you, Dr. Wily?
Well, should they be connected to Breath of the Wild? Are they? Yeah, they are, because they are referenced. However, you also see in video games and a lot of, like, that it's referenced doesn't necessarily mean that it's 100% connected always, you know? Because in the latest Paper Mario game, we also saw a Metroid helmet. Doesn't mean that the Metroid games take place in the Super Mario universe or the reverse. So, but...
So a quick question. Is that helmet an Easter egg? Like, is it just something you can find, or...
Yeah, but what is an Easter egg? Give me the definition of an Easter egg, then.
Like,
I mean...
DLC items would be kind of Easter eggy, or...
Yeah, a lot of the naming things are just Easter eggs. Like
now,
certain islands that are named after certain things, certain items that you can find, those are just Easter eggs. There are also direct connections story-wise, like in the ceremony, like Twilight is mentioned, Wind Waker is mentioned, Skyward Sword is mentioned, a lot is mentioned. A Link to the Past is mentioned, but that's fun. To be honest, that's fun and all, and I know they will link it somehow, like slightly. I think they will create a weak link between what happened before and what is happening now, as in Breath of the Wild and Breath of the Wild 2. But I think Nintendo realized, oh wait, what we created before that is kind of a mess story-wise. We can not possibly connect this. And they certainly weren't trying when they made Breath of the Wild, because there is no, that's why they mentioned everything. There is no direct connection to anything, because it's connected to all, which also means that it isn't connected to all. Because it wouldn't make sense if they are connected to all. So I think Nintendo just took them all, added them to the game, made sure like, hey, yeah, haha, those games happened. Yeah, you played them. Buy them again when we make a HD remake, please. And then they just continued with their own thing and said, all right, Breath of the Wild 2, we're going with a fresh start. These two games are certainly going to be connected, just like Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask are. And God knows what they do after this. Could be that they, from this point forward, really try to connect everything, like Breath of the Wild 2, Breath of the Wild 1, everything that came before, and then all the older games are just their own ancient history, which is vague and barely recorded in Hylian history, blah, blah, blah.
Yep, really looking forward to Breath of the Wild 3 in a decade.
Honestly, Oh, sorry?
No, I was going to say go ahead, Adam.
Okay. I was like spacing again, thinking about it. Honestly, I'm glad you guys had a lot to say on it, because I maybe don't have as much, because this question has me a bit conflicted, because there's like points that have already been mentioned give me reasons to say yes, but also no. Initially, I wanted to say yes, they are, but only because fans made it that way. Not physically made the game, but I think when Nintendo do things like that, like little things within the game, I think it is like solely just little fun nods. They never think of it as in like, oh, this will tie it to that. And that's what I mean by I think fans make it that way, which works, but also doesn't, because that's not Nintendo's intention. Like, it has me so conflicted to the point where I just want to like pass the question on to hear everyone else's thoughts, because I honestly don't have a solid answer to this one. I'm leaving it at I'm conflicted.
Sure.
Man, I wish Jordan, aka Masked Nintendo Bandit, were here. He actually did a theory on this, how the DLC items are canon, and I'm sure he's
I saw
to say
that
about
video.
this. Yeah. Like you're right. Like, we're making these things canon in our head. We're kind of developing our own head canon and assuming that it is the canon. A lot of the time, Nintendo just doesn't think ahead.
So I did want to bring up to the people tuning in that the Jordan, Masked Nintendo Bandit, Nintendo Masked Bandit, I always get it flipped. He did receive an invite, but he was busy, so he couldn't join us for this, unfortunately. But he's always welcomed here, of course.
So just go to the description of this video. His address will be linked there, and so you know where to direct your stones that are thrown.
Oh no! Oh no!
All right. So for me, I would say. Oh, I just got a message from Zeldum.
He's online.
Late to class.
I'm going to
Late to
class.
Probably gonna Andy's finally here. He's gonna come any second. Now it's gonna be great.
Gonna come in. Awesome.
Somebody close the door so we can kick it in.
Quick, seal the door, Dr. Wily.
All right, let's go. Let me get my welder.
I'll just paste in that, the Mega Man door sound effect. It'll be great.
Please, also please add in the sound effect where I kick down the door. Thanks.
All right, so I'll go ahead and explain mine, and he can probably come in and give his after Zelda Lores. But I honestly want everything to be canon. Well, not like the CDI games; those can go burn. But
poor Morshu. Poor Morshu.
But I want virtually everything to be canon, and so I'm conflicted as well, like Adam, because I feel very much that going from Skyward Sword into Breath of the Wild, they wanted to just gut the timeline. They wanted to get rid of it. That their meta concept was, this is too complicated, and we maybe only released information under duress, or maybe they didn't even realize that Hyrule Historia was including one. They just were like, here, make a Zelda book, and the guys who made it just created their own timeline. Who knows? The truth of that story will probably never be clear. The consequences are. So, yeah, it's really complicated. Welcome, Andy. Zeldum was...
Hey, welcome aboard!
Yeah.
Hey, we're going to play you like a fish.
I finally checked my Discord. Sorry,
welcome.
I forgot to put this in I'll put a reminder in my calendar for this.
It's okay.
No worries. The air traffic was terrible. I'm sure it was difficult for your Loftwing to land in this meeting.
Oh yes.
Exactly. That was it.
Andy, we really need to know, what color is your Loftwing?
What color is my Loftwing?
Is this a sexual innuendo?
I feel like it would be a lime green Loftwing.
Lime green.
Oh, interesting.
Okay, so...
Isn't that the color of one of the logos you have on your channel, or am I wrong?
Yeah, well, yeah, like the black and green is just my gaming, my general gamer colors. I got my black and green PC, all my Razer gear. It matches my profile, my profile picture.
Yeah.
Andy, would you like to give a brief introduction? So, just so the viewers know who you are, although everybody knows who you are because you're such a big Zelda tuber.
Exactly, I'm so famous, So, I'm Andy. I'm Zeldum. Yeah, I make Zelda videos. End of story.
You need to rate yourself.
Oh yeah,
rate myself again. Oh, I wasn't here for everyone else's ratings this time through.
I think they all went up by about half a point.
Actually, I think I went down by 2.5 points.
Oh.
Let's go with
you went down.
7.36 out of 10.
Whoa!
Nice.
Okay.
New record
on it today.
That's like some
there we go.
Breakdown. Okay, so we're currently on the second question, the big one, and I expect they'll probably have a pretty big result, a big conversation afterwards. But it is, do you think that the old games are canon to Breath of the Wild's continuity? I was in the middle of giving my thoughts on it, so I'll just do that, then Zelda lore, then you can jump in with yours, okay? So I was saying that I got it back in the right mindset.
Yeah, we gotta like kickstart the engine.
So I
Somebody
feel that
pull the cord.
Created the timeline under duress, or it may have been created indirectly by the Hyrule Historia team and maybe Nintendo or Aonuma, whoever wasn't paying attention when the book came out. But the result is there's a timeline now, and we have to deal with it. and by we, I really mean them. So I think when they created Breath of the Wild, their intent was just to sort of hand wave and scrub the other games away, possibly coming from the idea that Skyward Sword is the only real quote-unquote canon game before this, with nods to everything else as loose legends and interpretation. I mean, we all love the timeline. We're all Zelda theorists here, so we want things like, you know, the Minish Cap to feed into whatever, and we want all the heavy lore from Twilight Princess connected directly to both Majora's Mask and Ocarina of Time. But I think at the end of the day, they don't care. And the team in control right now really only cares about the connections to Skyward Sword, and there are so many Skyward Sword connections because they worked on Skyward Sword last. That's my thoughts. It's a bit cynical.
Yeah, no kidding. That was really cynical. Oh, wow.
How about you, Zelda lore?
I do think all the games prior to Breath of the Wild are canon. All of them.
Every single one.
But
that's a lot of them.
But but I also think that Breath of the Wild takes place in a very specific timeline. And that the other timelines that it references are like cross-timeline knowledge, in a way. But the events of the previous games, I do consider to be canon.
Yeah, but I don't agree with that at all. I don't agree with that at all. This is baloney. No, that's not how time travel stories work. This is not how
baloney. No. Man, I love baloney.
This is not how time travel works.
All we know right now from Breath of the Wild's timeline placement, and told to us by Numa and the developers, is that it takes place a really long far in the future after Ocarina of Time. And that's pretty much it. They also said that it takes place at the end of all the timelines, but I don't really buy that, because that would mean that it's in a timeline convergence or something, and there's evidence in the games that suggests that can't happen.
So I would point out that Hylia is a time goddess. So I have
an argument for this.
Okay.
Oh,
I wouldn't say that.
She is a time goddess. It's not unfeasible, though it doesn't really make sense, that somehow a time goddess could merge the timelines into a unified state. And it's nonsense if you ask me. But I could see from a fantasy writing standpoint of just saying that to try to justify it. I hope.
Yeah, all right. Funny you should say that, because I did a theory trying to explain the impossible time travel of Skyward Sword, and I ended up using Hylia at the end to merge the two timelines together to try and explain why that makes sense.
Oh, I'll have to go.
How long ago was that? I think I might have watched that one.
Let me check. It was something.
Yeah, like put a link into this in our chat. Like slap it down there, and I'll check that for a second.
Hey, boys, can I sneak in?
Sneak in? Of course you can't, Papa Wiley. Get in here.
It was 6 months ago.
Here we go for the roast. All right. The problem is with any ideas of, we can just converge the timelines. Hylia made it into one timeline. They can intermingle with other timelines. Is the big problem with that is the genie is out of the bottle. And if you bring that genie out of the bottle, then you really start to create a game where time travel can be used to solve every issue. And if there is an issue and it's not solved by time travel, then you're like, well, that's kind of dumb. They could have just solved this by time travel. That's why at the end of Skyward Sword, Nintendo decided to get rid of the Gates of Time. And that's why the Ocarina of Time is also not usable in every game, or not seen in every game, because then you could think, wait, if they have this problem, can't they just use the Ocarina of Time and go back, or get the Gate of Time and go back? The problem is, if you suggest that, oh no, there is some connection between all the timelines, then you would basically say, oh yeah, there's a multiverse, and there are ways to travel between the multiverses, because otherwise there wouldn't be trails of the other multiverses. That wouldn't make sense.
For example, the Triforce, for example, could alter history if you wished for it as well.
How about we make an example where, like,
but then it's the genie. Then you have the genie out of the bottle, so then there's no excuse to not use it in a scenario which is messed up in a way. That's why doing that is a terrible idea, because it will create a lot more plot problems.
I totally get what you're saying.
We can already see that in A Link to the Past.
Yeah, in A Link to the Past, that's what, I mean, I'm not going to say Nintendo hasn't, to some extent, made that mistake already. They have. But if they say, oh, no, every timeline, you could just hop from one to the other and the other and the other, you know, and time is also just, who cares? Time is just a concept, bro. Then you really start to, in my opinion, mess with the story in a way that is, you can't repair it at that point.
I think
it's damaged beyond repair.
Honestly, I don't want to see any more of the Zelda story with time travel.
Yeah.
Because it's just a problem and answer.
So I think that these games should clean up their mess at the end. So like at end of Ocarina of Time, or maybe in Twilight Princess, they should have shown the Ocarina of Time getting smashed or broken or running out of power, or whatever. Just so that way it's not the, oh, we're going to fix things with time travel. I mean, they broke the Mirror of Twilight to try to not make it relevant anymore. Good on them. And there are other games where they sort of broke their
and a few Shadow.
But yeah, they should really clean up more.
They did that with the Twilight Mirror. They did that with the Gates of Time in Skyward Sword. They got rid of all of them, basically.
The Kingdom of Hyrule in Wind Waker. They flooded it.
Yeah.
Yeah, also, they got rid of that as well.
The Phantom Hourglass was empty by the end of the game as well.
Yes, they need to get other, because otherwise you get left with certain like magical MacGuffins in the world that can solve everyone's issue, and then in the next game or the one after that, you're like, wait, all these problems could be solved by this one magical MacGuffin, and that's why I think saying, oh yeah, no, all the timelines are connected, or no, time is not a concept, or when it comes to the story, that's not a good thing, because you just create a billion plot holes. Because time travel is plot hole sensitive already. It's very tricky to do right. There are very little franchises, movies, or whatever that actually pull it off correctly. Even the Marvel recently with like Endgame and Infinity War made no sense at all from a time travel perspective. It was also kind of messy. So
they used two different types and try to explain one as quantum tunneling and the other one as quote unquote traditional time travel.
I miss the days of like Back to the Future where it was simpler. You know, you go back, grandfather effect, end of story.
Great Scott.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you use time travel, box it in a certain way so that it's not incredibly... For example, one way you could box in time travel is that you can only go forward and never go back. That's one way you can box it in, for example, and solve a lot of issues. Yeah.
Has anyone watched the Loki series yet? I'm just saying.
Yeah. Oh, we better not introduce any spoilers to that.
No.
Well,
oh, man.
Who knows? Aonuma may try to pull in a TVA for the Zelda
no, you
franchise.
mean like the goddess Hylia has like her own agent administration that controls who's allowed to time travel where and what.
Yes,
and
they control the timelines.
Yeah, and they're stealing the Ocarina of Time in the middle of games and then reintroducing it when they need to. Yeah, it was perfect.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, is that really a thing in that show?
I just had that idea of like, ooh, what if there was some outside controlling force controlling the timelines?
Yeah, how about I smoothly try and segue us back into what our original thing was? So I believe that question, Sue's real question here is Nintendo trying to ditch the original games with Breath of the Wild? Like, are they trying to separate themselves? And if that is the core of the question, if that's what we're trying to get at, then I would say, yeah. It seems like Nintendo is trying to separate themselves from the era of myth. So anything from before Breath of the Wild just becomes irrelevant. It's a fun Easter egg. It might be canon. There are references, but it doesn't play a big deal. So we're not going to be seeing the Twilight return, more than likely. We aren't going to be seeing Wind Waker and the King of Red Lights. Like, we won't see any of that stuff anymore. It's just in the past.
The Rito aren't secretly aquatic creatures. Andy.
Yeah, like, all that fun stuff.
I'd argue that they are.
It's like they've created two separate sets of games, and they're starting a new one. We have the old games; those are great, and then there's Breath of the Wild, but they have to almost be appreciated separately, which
almost
is
like a reboot.
Yeah, it's a soft reboot. That's the term I've been hearing a lot, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard it as well.
I do have a feeling that Breath of the Wild 2 is gonna not reference any of the ancient technology and stuff, and it's gonna be like its own thing. And I've kind of seen the developers also say, "Oh, it's its own story, it's its own thing as well." So maybe they're moving forward. They're just gonna do stories that are on their own.
It feels very
you know what I mean?
Skyward Sword related, unshakably so to me. Andy, let's go ahead and get your view on it, Zeldum, of question number 2, which is officially, do you think the old games are canon to the Breath of the Wild continuity?
Man, having to get my opinion on and I go back and forth between this thing too, because I totally agree. It really does feel like Nintendo is just trying to brush it all off, especially after reading Creating a Champion. How they specifically categorized it as an era, like Brett said, as an era of legend or myth, and they even specifically say that there's one paragraph on that Breath of the Wild timeline where it says ancient history, and it basically lists the events of Ocarina of Time with Ganondorf and all that stuff. But then there's it's not a footnote because it's at the top. It's like a header at the top of the page, and it says somewhere that it's basically it's so difficult to tell the difference between historical fact and legend. So it feels like in that book they are trying to address that all of the games we've known so far may not actually be historical fact. They are in fact just legends of Zelda, not the story of Zelda. So do I think the old games going forward may be relevant to Breath of the Wild? I'm actually nowadays I'm starting to lean towards no. As much as I would love for them to, because everyone who knows me knows I love Skyward Sword, and I like to tie Skyward Sword into every aspect of Zelda imaginable. And it breaks my heart to say that Skyward Sword may have not been accurate in terms of Breath of the Wild's lore. But that really feels like that feels like the direction they're heading with the series. Like I mentioned, that article or the little paragraph from Creating a Champion, and just the overall. I'm gonna wait for the sequel to come out before I come up with my own, because I feel like the sequel is going to get to change all of our perspectives drastically.
I hope so. I'll overlay that article you were talking about for the viewers during your segment. All right. Let's move towards the third question then. Why is the timeline important to you as a theorist?
Looks like it's back to me. All right. Well, for me, I don't even think of myself as a Zelda theorist YouTuber. I don't think I actually have any video on my channel which is dedicated to a Zelda theory. I like to cover fun facts. I like to speculate on what the future games will be like, but I have yet to make a theory. I probably will sometime in the future, but I haven't done it for... Oh, hey, I guess I'm not going first. All right.
I'm kidding. Continue.
Instead of theorist, how about...
Well, actually, I could segue this well. I have the segue. Yeah, so, although I might not be a theorist on YouTube, I am a hobby theorist. I love thinking of theories in my head that I could add to my headcanon, and I love kind of collecting theories from other people that I can add to my headcanon. And for me, the reason the timeline matters is because it's fun. It's fun to try and speculate on different ways you can conglomerate it together and how you can fix it and why there are certain retcons and mistakes and if they're actually intricate ways that the plot is meant to be deeper, that kind of stuff. And I've done that myself. I've created many variations of timelines that I've spent hours on just because I enjoy it. And then talking and sharing the timelines with others. And seeing what other people are coming up with. Pixel Fusion, you dropped 2 different timelines, and I've been looking at those during our conversation. I think they're really interesting. I like them. And then Zelda lore, I've seen yours as well. And who's that guy that made the timeline with the I think with Vaati winning being
You're
split
really
up.
Historian. Yeah, and mine is based on his timeline as well.
Well, he based it on somebody else, didn't he?
In Strutulus, yeah, they
in
work
Strutulus,
together.
yeah, in Strutulus. I love his timeline. They're just so fun. So that's why it matters to me, not because a canon timeline pieces it together well. On the contrary, I think it is usually illogical. I don't think that timeline does a very good job. I like the idea of fans being able to make their own timelines. I think that's why it matters to me.
That whole player interpretation thing, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like that's probably the biggest cop-out they threw out.
Mm-hmm. The only purpose I can think of for a canon timeline that is really meaningful, at least to me, is that a canon timeline streamlines theories. It makes it so that we can all talk on the same page, have one language for what timeline we're talking about. But outside of that, I don't think we need it. I just love making fan timelines, reading them, seeing more about them. That's what matters to me.
What do you think, Dr. Wily?
Well, I mean, obviously I'm not a huge fan of the timeline, and I don't think it's necessarily useful. However, one thing I do appreciate it for, and they've already kind of done that every game, but eventually when they decided to do the timeline, they smoothed it out a bit. There need to be some checks and boundaries, in my opinion, in order to create a playing field where you can logically make theories, put together timelines, lore, and whatever. And that's what they should have done. And they've done that. For example, with Skyward Sword, in my opinion, was crucial for setting that playing field. Like making that first game, explaining the hero, the events that happened before, how the Master Sword was made, that kind of thing. They should have, in my opinion, they should have just done that. And I appreciate the timeline a lot for that they created those checks and boundaries and certain rules in place, so you know what game you're playing in that regard. But aside from that, I think they shouldn't have made a timeline at all. Just create those checks and boundaries and to give us a bit of an idea of what things are linked. You know, for example, why does Link continue coming back? Oh, it's because of the hero, and Zelda, because of the goddess. You know, where did the Triforce come from? Where did the Master Sword come from? Some general things in order to create a layout of the world, to like sketch a scene in that regard, and then just let people run wild in it. That's what I would have done.
Well, to some extent, they have allowed that, right, with their caveat at the bottom of the encyclopedia that says, attentive readers may note that the timeline shown here differs slightly from the one found in Hyrule Historia. The timeline can be interpreted in many different ways and may change depending on new discoveries that have come to light. And here's the key part, on players' imaginations.
They also, I think on page 8, they also say that most of the information on the book is their own interpretation. Like, it's not like Nintendo told us to write this. It's like the writer's interpretation of the events of the games.
No, it is. But just because they created that timeline, they did create some sort of that standard. And that's why I don't like it that much. They created, like, it might say in the tiniest of letters underneath it, oh, Lamau, we just came up with this randomly. But people will still take this as like, no, this is from Nintendo, this is fact, and this is real. If you come around with another timeline, you're bullshit and you're a bad YouTuber, you know? So that's what I don't like about it. They shouldn't have created the timeline because it sets them as like the arbiters and standard.
Right, and so that's kind of what I said before, where maybe they didn't exactly have the authority to create an official timeline, but the end result is that one was created and we're stuck with it now. This is the consequence. This entire conversation today is a consequence of them making that book. So,
but the timeline can change, and it's changed before.
Yeah, but then they're still the arbiters. Then they're still arbiters of the timeline, because they change it. That's what I don't like. I wouldn't necessarily call it gatekeeping, because it's not like they did it on purpose as a gatekeeping thing. But in the end, it kind of amounts to that to an extent.
Well, I think it was Anuma that said that when they create new games and try to place them into the timeline, they have like this oh crap moment, and then they have to like change the placement on the timeline. So I think the timeline is like constantly evolving, and maybe the game is placed in one specific location, and then you move it to somewhere else. So maybe
Zelda lore. I've heard the same thing. That quote that they After they make the game, they make the game first, then they figure out, okay, where might this go? And that kind of mentality, we've already talked about it a bunch. That doesn't make a good overarching story.
Miyamoto is pretty famous for creating his game mechanics and the game first and not really caring about any continuity.
Yeah, if there even is any continuity.
That's why the Super Mario games are such a mess. Super Mario, they completely were like, well, we don't give a damn about this. So the story-wise, that franchise is, my lord, that's all over. And with Zelda, they at least tried it, but they still went with the same mentality of creating everything and then tacking a story on at the end, which just results in bad story. But I don't regard Nintendo as... To be honest, I don't find Nintendo like the most genius story writers ever. They're like the brightest bulb of this age. No, but by far they aren't. My lord.
Yeah, I mean, they're decent in a way, you know, like they can make stories that we enjoy, and I think they excel at making characters we love, and then seeing develop. For instance, Groose, you know, just perfect example. Like we love seeing their characters, but the story of the games and how those connect together. Yeah, that leaves something to be desired. Oh.
I think personally, on a smaller scale, Nintendo is genius at making stories. Games like Twilight Princess, Majora's Mask, like even the smaller side quests have a lot of detail to them. Like even characters that don't matter too much have a lot going for themselves. However, I don't think they're good at making bigger overarching stories. It's just game specific or side quest specific. You know, they do a great job, but aside from that, no, they are kind of bottom of the barrel in the industry. It's not like it's the MCU does it better by a whole lot.
What I think is Nintendo deliberately leave things vague for us, the fans, to figure out, because they probably don't even know.
Yeah.
So, for example, in Twilight Princess, and I've seen this in interviews, like, for example, the King Sora of Twilight Princess is supposed to be the King Sora from Ocarina of Time, but they don't really mention that in the game. But in the interview, they say that they kept asking if they could do certain things, like, for example, like the fisherman from Ocarina of Time and certain references. So I think that they do that they add certain elements, but they're not like really laid out. They leave it intentionally so that fans figure it out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's I think that's the better approach in general. That's why still I think the timeline shouldn't have existed, because that is not necessarily vague. Like if they leave things vague, that's where Nintendo excels, because there are always loose threads and tiny things where you can connect them or look at it from different ways, and that's what makes Zelda stories interesting, in my opinion. That it's not exactly connected. However, the timeline connects everything, so...
Yeah.
Really that response, yeah.
A lot of yes.
I mean, like, I feel like Dr. Wily and I are very much aligned in this. Not on everything, but...
Yeah.
Like 90%.
What do you mean?
Man, if only Nehru were here, he would really just like fart on all of us with his debating prowess. Like honestly.
So for
bro, give me a one-on-one him.
So for
Nehru, I'm gonna speak for him for a second. I know that he's very adamant that Nintendo made a timeline, and that is the way it is. And we can't change the canon or anything. So it would have been great if we could get him. And if you haven't watched this stuff yet, go check him out. Nehru's great. Nehru's a great guy.
I really wish that the lore was more solid and undebatable. I really wish it wasn't so flexible or plastic, you know?
Interesting. All right.
That's something I like about it personally.
Same.
I just don't. It's just not as stable as I would as I would hope. I mean, because
bro, it's not a mortgage. Calm down. It doesn't have to be stable.
It is a fictional series. Like it's a bunch of fictional games.
I would just like it to. I'd love to have a more just have a much more developed story and continuity between the games, because I feel like we just don't know anything. It's like, boom, we have Twilight Princess, and somehow it jumps forward about 100 years, and we get some small references. We get some references here and there to Ocarina of Time, but that's that's the biggest Twilight Princess to Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. That's the biggest continuity we've even seen, and those are still just hints and traces to other games. Like the fact that the hero shade is the hero of time, it's one of the most widely accepted theories, but it's still just a theory. It's not confirmed, you know?
I want to say that the connection from Ocarina of Time to Wind Waker is pretty strong, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, well that too. I'm sorry, I always forget about Wind Waker because that's just me. But yes, I agree. The continuity between Ocarina to Wind Waker is also very good.
Can I play devil's advocate for a second?
Sure.
All right, so you guys are asking for a more solidified timeline, but there are examples of video gaming series where they try to make a really solidified timeline, but it just can't last for as long because the details start getting really specific and really complicated. A great example would be Fallout or Skyrim with the Bethesda. Bethesda just cannot keep up with how many details there are, and undoubtedly they mess things up. I know there was a lot of controversy with Fallout 4 with some of the ways that it dealt with its lore because it contradicted things from before, and that's just because there are so many hundreds of thousands of details that they need to keep track of. The vagueness of the series might actually protect it from that kind of thing. From being so complicated that we get hung up on these tiny little details and hate the company for it.
That's true, because they always can retcon. They always can retcon and add and go back and basically establish the stuff that would always seem super mysterious for us before. Who knows, with the Zonai, all of a sudden the Zonai could go ahead and they could explain stuff from before the era of Skyward Sword with the ancient robots. Like, there's a civilization that existed on the world that had advanced technology before Skyward Sword, during the era of Hylia and before the war with Demise and all that stuff. Who knows? Like, for all we know, they could retcon that information that was seemingly like very undeveloped and make that a very central part of the lore. For all we know,
is that retconning or is that development?
So
it doesn't seem like they're actually going back and changing anything if they do that.
I would say
a bit of both. It could be a bit of both. It can go either way. They can retcon or they can develop. I don't know.
I would say that retconning and development are not mutually exclusive. Retcon gets a bad rap because we know about the ones that contradict, whatever the story is. But retconning can be done well, and a good example to bring up is the Kingdom Hearts series. Love it or hate it, Tetsuya Nomura is very good at creating concepts and backporting them into previous things. It's concluded.
Wait, can I...
Maybe I shouldn't have dropped Kingdom Hearts. Oh gosh.
No, don't drop Kingdom Hearts. Eel. Disgusting.
Wow.
I've had many conversations about this with HMK. We're not going to get into this.
Yeah. Let's move to
all right.
Hyrule Gamer. Go ahead and give your views on the current question.
The question is, why is the timeline important to you as a theorist, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess that might be a little harder to answer because, like, for the past 2 or 3 months, I've maybe done 2 theories because I've been kind of swaying away from them just purely because I've had more interest in speculation, ideas, and mysteries. I guess mysteries kind of come under theories, but generally speaking, if I was to make a theory, I think it creates a nice framework, I think that would be the right word, to work with when you're talking about games that expand over, like, thousands of years. It creates like a base set of guidelines almost to do with what happens when, but outside of that, it's not that important to me because, I mean, that's just me personally. I guess the question is direct because the theories I kind of like to talk about are very set to that game. I don't like crossing games, if that makes sense, and that's mainly because the timeline confuses me a little at times. I will admit that openly.
And then complicated interactions confuses people.
Yeah, and then like you get filled with comments of like, oh, but actually, like my view on the timeline would like ruin your theory and stuff like that. And that's fun, but it's not for me right now.
It's exhausting.
It can be exhausting, yeah. And I think that might be partially why I've swayed away from theories recently. But generally speaking, it's important because it gives you a nice little bit of like framework, some guidelines. But yeah, I guess I'd say that. That's why it's important to me.
Having recently worked with Zelda on some things, the amount of fact checking for theory content we did, I can say it. Yeah, it was kind of exhausting.
Just and the amount of
for some people
are
they
always
really
going to have their
that.
own interpretations and take their own interpretations as if it's their own canon, or head canon, and yeah.
So, Dr. Wily, did you just release a video?
Whoa! You
about theories? And I think this involves the timeline a little bit.
Nobody sees my notifications.
He did all the production for this video.
Yeah, I got the notification.
I see your notifications still. No, that's just kind of ironic that in the middle of us, doing this, it happened to be released.
Yeah, no, I was just uploading the video in the middle of this.
Oh, okay. I thought you had
I have the biggest of brains, and I can do two things at the same time. I use one half for horseshit that comes out of my mouth, aka words, and the other half for doing physical tasks like uploading videos.
Power to you. I wish I had that power.
And now I'm really curious. Did you make a killer robot to upload your videos with?
No.
The Mega Man connection.
All right.
I just made a killer robot to force YouTube to promote my videos, and that's why I'm here now.
All right. So let me give my take on the question. Just running back to that. Why is the Zelda timeline important to me as a Zelda theorist? So the big reason for me is simply because I love playing with concepts. And 19 games, or at least I think I counted 19 games in one of my timelines. That's a lot of things to play with. Back and forth, here and there, how things connect. Many of us have played with concepts before. The big ones, of course, right now being Breath of the Wild connection to Skyward Sword. There were clear connections put in place there, and it makes you wonder, what are some of the other things going on here? Did some of these other games exist, like Twilight Princess? They talk about the embers of Twilight and flying through the sky. There's a girl who talks about, loft wings. So, just thinking about, how does this connect? Zelda lore and I had a little bit of an exchange a couple weeks ago talking about, the Secret Realm, and if it's corrupted, where did Ganondorf get banished to? And, I've always been of the opinion that, say, the Sacred Realm got corrupted when Ganondorf touched it in Ocarina of Time, and that became his prison, both going into Wind Waker and into A Link to the Past. But Zelda lore has a very different opinion than mine here, which is great, because we're different people. That level of creativity in analyzing and speculating, that is why I wanted to become a Zelda theorist, and that's what the timeline gives. I've thought about jumping into other series and, like Square Enix stuff, and it's just not as verbose. It's not as malleable. So the Zelda timeline is very much more appealing to me.
Did you say Square Enix?
I did.
Oh yeah, I like that.
Wait, what
games would you be going over in that?
I love the
Square Enix. Isn't that a huge thinking company that covers a ton of stuff?
So as an example, I love the Final Fantasy series. It's 15 plus games, some of them directly connected to them, but it's just not as meaty of a connection as, say, having a big stable timeline laid out. The games are very loosely connected to other main entries, at best through mystical void nonsense that they sort of inhabit, but it's not like the events of one clearly play into another one outside of the Final Fantasy 10 to 7 connection. That I don't want to get into that.
I think you just described the Zelda timeline, but just replaced one or two words.
The point being is the Zelda timeline is important to me because I can play with it and come up with really interesting concepts. My recent video is talking about Fierce Deity Link and how maybe it was created by Hylia. Just a really interesting concept. Anyhow, I've rambled for a bit. Go ahead, Zelda lore.
Well,
you got to review the question we were going over. It's been so long. Wow.
Unless people want to respond to my crazy viewpoints.
I want to respond.
Sure.
Epic. Here we go, kids. All right. This is also kind of a comeback on what Zeldom said.
That's me.
With the whole thing of you want a more rigid story.
Yeah.
I appreciate the Zelda timeline in certain ways, and I'm glad it's not very rigid. I don't think it should be very rigid, and that's because something that Brad also said a little bit ago. When you have a game that has a very rigid story, the longer it runs, the more dumb it kind of gets. And I've seen this happen with a lot of franchises. I saw this with Halo. Halo got more and more stupid as time went on. The same goes for, and this is where I had it like big time. I used to be very big into World of Warcraft. Like, I was very heavy into it.
Yeah.
But that game is also so incredibly old that villains they set up, or like big overarching villains that we could never defeat in the very first installment, were peanuts like 5 or 6 expansions later. And that's because they had to go somewhere, and it was like, well, I mean, we created this super villain that created all evil in the world, and at some point
you're talking about power creep, right? Just the natural development of power creep into the franchises. Yeah.
That's just one thing. Power creep is just one thing. At some point, that franchise also started messing around with time travel, then they went with space travel, alternate dimensions. So, like, if you have a very rigid story, at some point you run out of content or run out of ideas, and then you start to get to a bit of a wacky place. And luckily enough, Zelda doesn't have that as much because it's more malleable and things aren't as connected, so it's not like, oh, we need to do this now because we did that, and that before it.
Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense because Zelda's like I've always been interested in all these franchises like World of Warcraft, Lord of the Rings that have these huge expanses of lore. But Zelda was like the only one, or at least the first one that I've really gotten into. Like, I've had time to, or not had time, but I've allowed myself or forced myself to delve into. So I am not as familiar with the lore of World of Warcraft because I haven't actually played the game myself. So I have done some reading on the lore, but I can totally believe now, like, that yes, it makes total sense as the series progresses over time. That with all the keeping up with all those details would eventually lead to the collapse of the franchise. That does make a lot of sense to me. I just haven't witnessed that with other series because I have not played that many franchises.
Well, I mean, for example, with with some franchises, it never really happens. You know, for example, everything from Lord of the Rings, which was made by Tolkien. Tolkien is dead, so there's not much to make anymore. And before Lord of the Rings, like, he made Lord of the Rings, and before he made Lord of the Rings, he just set up the world with a lot of prequels. But the end goal was always Lord of the Rings. But the problem is, with a franchise like The Legend of Zelda or any other that needs to go on for a long-ass time, is that if you set up such a timeline, then something else has to come after, and you're like, well, what are we gonna put here? I don't know. Like, it's just imagine, you have the Harry Potter movies, and Voldemort is dead, and that's all over, and Harry won, yippee-ki-yay, we did it. And let's say, oh no, it needs to continue because it's making money. What are you going to do after? Everything that's going to come after is going to lose all its power in that regard. You have to do prequels. And that's what they did with Harry Potter at some point, is they just messed around with prequels. Just like after Lord of the Rings, they started to mess with prequels. Usually they start to mess with prequels because that's the only thing you can really mess with. So personally, I think having a timeline, but not a very strict or rigid one, is great for Nintendo and The Legend of Zelda, because Nintendo is not that great at overarching stories, so it would become very messy if they tried to do one with like rigid rules and linear and all that stuff. And it allows them to really mess with new concepts and new things that might seem weird, but turn out to be very fun, even though it doesn't make sense in the story, you know? Because it doesn't matter, really. They can do whatever they want. It gives him a lot more creative freedom without it seeming weird, odd, or taking away power from a certain villain because he can be killed by one snap of a finger or whatever the hell.
Yep, single silver arrow kills Ganon. And then it was 4.
Yeah, and then the silver arrows, they got rid of them, and now we don't have to worry about silver arrows being the one and only thing that can kill Ganon.
Yeah, now don't get me started. Don't get me started on that. I was a little disappointed with that when I played A Link to the Past for the first time.
Yeah, rightfully so. But that's why it's so important for Nintendo to not hold a rigid line, but just certain items just disappear. They are gone. They don't matter anymore. Just imagine how every game in the franchise would be if the Ocarina of Time worked the same as it did in Majora's Mask, where you could manipulate time. That would also create absolute chaos and a mess. And it would also just nullify certain events or certain enemies. That's why I don't like in Age of Calamity that they can time travel and just, oh, hey, come on, little buddies, whoa! You know, it completely takes away. They were building, with that game, for example, they were building up such a big thing at the end, you know, because, Calamity Ganon, here he comes. We need to defeat this now or we lose, either of the two. That was kind of the thing they were in for. And then they were just like, well, or we could just use time travel to solve it. Yes, blop. And they threw that in, and then everything was solved, and the entire suspense was gone. The dread was gone. Every sort of emotion or feeling that you had with the story up until that point was just gone.
I really wanted them to make an unapologetically sad game or
yes, same.
Me too.
I was in for that. That's also what the marketing said. They also lied to us like big time.
Okay. They ought to just make an option when you turn on that game, like you could flip a switch, which is like, do you want the canon version or do you want the fun version? And you like choose. That'd be so good. That would cause no controversy whatsoever.
I know, right?
It would be kind of fun.
But I do think
DLC pack that they released for it was like the altered story, the bad story. Go ahead, Zelda lore.
I do think that the reason they changed the story to have a happy ending is mainly due to the actual story. Because, for example, the gameplay, you have the characters and you level them up and everything, but then when they die, you won't be able to play as them anymore, right? So then what's the point of leveling them up?
No, I don't agree with that, because you could just... That's the same as saying... No, I don't agree with that at all, because you could just make sure that when you beat the game, and that was it. You get the ending cutscene, and then when you boot the game up, you can again select the end of the game. Right. You know,
they can
just like in Breath of the Wild. In Breath of the Wild, you can also just replay the game after beating Ganon.
Well,
it's not the same.
Even though you can go back to him and kill him again and again and again.
I mean,
but like after you beat the final boss, it's never the same. It never feels the same, and it won't.
I mean, they can keep.
Yeah, no, but it's not a good enough reason to not go in that direction in terms of story. That's in my opinion a pretty weak reason to not do it.
I do think that to tell the story of the Great Calamity, I don't think a game would be the best way to go. But I do think that a movie or a trilogy would be like the best way to tell the story.
Wasn't Age of Calamity a borderline movie?
There were I mean, it basically was a movie. Like the amount of cutscenes we got in Age of Calamity, like, holy man,
it would have totally done
3 hours. 3 hours.
Yeah, but I mean, we played Age of Calamity specifically for the story, didn't we?
We did. That was
that was the only reason I bought it.
Why not make a movie or a trilogy? Just focus on the story. Same artwork, right? From Breath of the Wild, same 3D models and everything. Same composers, same voice actors and everything, and just tell the full story from beginning to end.
Yeah, but then I would have never bought Age of Calamity. I would have never bought Age of Calamity then. Then that game is completely useless in my opinion. It has no right to exist.
Well, what he's saying is instead of making a game, do the movie or trilogy, not in addition to the game.
No, I don't agree with that. I think they could have easily done it with Age of Calamity with the amount of cutscenes they had, the emotional tension they were building, expanding on characters. Everything was going fine in that game, in my opinion, up until the point where they were like, haha, fun time portals. Everything was going fine until they went completely off the rails and just insane.
Does anyone know what the sales were on Age of Calamity? Because I honestly feel like
let me do the Google.
The numbers might surprise me, but I feel just by looking at the hype on I feel like when it was first announced, the hype for it was insane, just like Breath of the Wild 2. but I feel like people stopped caring about Age of Calamity very, very quickly.
Yes. 3.7 million copies, I think.
Because it was so clear that it was in an alternate timeline. The first thing they do is throw that little egg robot through a time portal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's personally I was done with the game quite fast. Like, the gameplay was fun and all, but it wasn't enough to captivate me for very long. And then when I found out that the story was just some lame-ass cop-out like that, I was like, hell, I'm not even going to finish this game.
Honestly, I would have rather taken the movie, because the gameplay didn't even really captivate me much at all. Like, hack and slash, I mean, I played it and it was okay. I had a lot more fun playing it with my sister on the 2-player mode, but that's because you're playing it with someone else. But playing it by myself, the gameplay just wasn't very interesting. I'm not a fan of like the hack and slash, Dynasty Warriors type of game.
So
all right. Give me 1 second.
I hate Dynasty Warriors type of games, but there was just something about Age of Calamity that I felt the need. Like, every time they sprinkled icons on the screen, gotta go around and do all the missions. Oh, look, I unlocked this new character. Now there's 17 things I need to do for them.
The existence of Hestu and the Great Fairies and all of that, I'm just like, nah.
Oh god, please no more joke characters.
That's my biggest thing with the original Hyrule. I haven't even played the original Hyrule Warriors, but it just oh man, the existence of like Agatha being a fighter, characters that aren't supposed to fight.
Right,
like
they're non-combatants. They shouldn't fight.
As much as I love Marin's artwork, and it's great having like a full HD 3D rendering of Marin. It's great for all of our like thumbnails and all of that stuff, because all of us Marin simps. But like, she's not a fighter. No.
But she drops the windfish on people as her super move.
I know. It just no. Why is she in the game?
All right.
That's just that's a tangent.
We're gonna go down the list one by one from top to bottom, and you all have the ability, the chance to guess how many sales Age of Calamity has.
Oh,
all right.
Okay. I got this.
Right, you can do it, mate.
Let me get
2.
1 point of reference.
2. The answer's 2. I got it.
Let me ask for
no.
first.
Well,
what were the final sales, the current sales of Breath of the Wild? Just so we can. Oh, we know that's the last one.
Wowzers! Okay, that's gonna be big.
Like 1 point.
Breath of the Wild is high as all hell. That's 22.28 million.
Okay, and what were
so 22 million.
What were the sales of the first Hyrule Warriors?
Hyrule. Give me 1 second.
There are a lot of versions of that, aren't there? That's gonna be a bit tough to find.
Yeah. Compile them all, I guess.
I can't find Hyrule Warriors that fast. Sorry.
Right. So I'm gonna go with just 1 million.
1 million
all right.
1 million. Okay.
Adam?
Might be a bit generous.
Me?
Yeah.
5 million.
Ooh. Whoa. All right, Pixel.
I'm gonna go with 5,000,001. No, I'm gonna.
Phantom Hourglass apparently sold close to 5 million. Like, to give you guys some perspective.
I'm gonna say 7.5.
Dang it! That was what I was gonna pick.
Whoa! Okay, that's a lot. That's Ocarina of Time level of sales.
I already looked the number before, so.
All right. Then you can't guess. Darn it.
Is it my turn? Or is it Adam's?
Yeah, it's your turn. No, Zelda, it's your turn.
Let's go with 4 million.
And Zelda missed a winner! Woo!
No stinking way.
3.7 million sales.
3.7. Okay, jeez.
I can't believe it sold that well.
I know, right? I would have guessed like sub 2 million.
Yeah, I mean that's really impressive for a third-party game.
I guarantee you that's only because of the probably from the pre-orders with all of the first announcement of it, like with the huge hype. I know I went ahead and pre-ordered it the day of, so I feel like a lot of people went and pre-ordered it before we even had any kind of hints or leaks about time travel.
And like the biggest disappointment for me regarding it is, I don't like Hyrule Warriors as a series, and I don't like the Musou series concept. But this seemed like a really clever way to go back and explore the various wars we've seen in Hyrule in the timeline. Like, could you imagine them doing the Sealing War as a Hyrule Warriors game?
Yes.
Or
yes.
like the Interloper War, all that stuff. Such
I did a video talking about that. I did a video talking about that, and I had Hyrule Gamer and a lot of people actually talking about that, like all the different ideas of all the potential games. It's like 40 minutes or so. But I really, really think that would be a really cool idea to have.
Perfect way to take that series.
Yeah, because it's not a traditional Zelda game with the dungeons. It's more like the wars. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let's get a little bit more back on topic, guys.
Yeah.
Zelda lore. Why is the timeline important to you as a Zelda content creator? I know you're not really a theorist. Content creator.
Well, I kind of am a theorist. I do theories every once in a while. But I really like the timeline. Well, a timeline, because I don't really like the one presented in Hyrule Historia or Encyclopedia, but that's a different topic. But I really like the idea of a timeline of events between the games, specifically because it allows for crafting theories, and basically I really like filling in the details between the games. That's my absolute hobby. I always I'm really thinking things, and I'm really diving into the lore of the games, and that's something I really, really enjoy. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think we all generally want more of those details filled out. I pointed out how I like to, it's important to me because I want to try to figure this stuff out, and it's great. It's a great creative outlet.
But if everything is like revealed, like absolutely everything, then there wouldn't be room for theorizing. And I think that there should be a balance between the two. Like, give us information, but then also leave it a little bit blank. So then us as theorists and fans can speculate and fill in the gaps as well.
Yeah.
Which I think is what they're doing.
Pulling back the curtain a little, but not completely.
Exactly.
Letting us peek.
Because I do think that Nintendo has an overall idea what's going on. Because they do have a really secret document that only a very select few people in Nintendo can actually see.
Oh, right, yeah, they're super secret documents that they have hidden on a shelf somewhere.
So I do think that,
way too many things.
And they have stated that document, they keep changing it and iterating it over and over and over again. And the timeline, they probably have like a really different timeline in that document that they keep changing with each game that they release. So I'm really curious of what that document could say, because that would be like a wellspring of lore.
Do we even is there even any credence to that? Like, I know that they've mentioned the document. They've said we have a document somewhere, right? But they're clearly not using it. And if they are, the document's super confusing to the point where we might as well just ignore it, right? Am I alone in thinking that?
From what I've gathered, they do use it during development, but only the director, Aonuma, and someone else are allowed to see that document, and then they go on from there. That's what I've gathered.
That's weird.
I think I have an idea what it says.
What's your idea?
Oh no! Oh no!
It just says
a blank page.
It just no. It just says Zelda gamers are going through whatever Lamau.
The scroll.
Whatever Lamau.
It just says do whatever Lamau. Nothing more. Nothing less.
Oh my gosh.
They'll buy it anyway, just like the Wii U Lamau.
How about you, Andy? Zelda. What's your views?
Well, I just like the timeline because it gives us some kind of structure as a theorist, because if there was absolutely nothing laid out, it would make our jobs a lot more difficult. Because if absolutely everything was up to interpretation and for us to stitch together, then can you imagine what our comment sections would look like? Literally everyone would have their... Oh man, every single comment would be like starting an argument practically. But I like about because I think that they've been done a very good job at balancing. They said here, use this at your own discretion. Like it's not foolproof, but I mean here's this. So I think we could all assume like Skyward Sword comes before Ocarina of Time, and Ocarina of Time is before Twilight Princess, and same with Ocarina to Wind Waker, and Ocarina to A Link to the Past, for example. I think we could all kind of draw some kind of possible connections like that on our own. But like stitching together the flow of the lore without the timeline on our own would it would get a lot more ambiguous. So I think it helps establish some kind of understanding for the series that we can all relate to. That way we can all come up with our own theories based on some kind of common grounds. You know?
Yeah. And I think there's enough solidity in place to let us play with the concept, but it's not just a sand pit where people can draw any type of conclusion. That's probably what we all like.
Well, even in the Zelda Encyclopedia, they even say like parts of the timeline are up to interpretation. I have had some people stretch that so far as to say, I've argued with some people who claim that Minish Cap is actually before Skyward Sword.
Yeah. I have heard that before. I kind of like it. It's a fun theory, but kind of out there.
It's a bit out there. I don't want to like discourage people from that, but no.
That's partially because
it doesn't make sense considering that we have Zelda already being a princess and Haru being established and everything. So it doesn't really make sense. There was a king prior to Skyward Sword, like mentioned in the 5th century, but that's about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean it's fun, but it's a little out there. And then part of that's because Capcom, when they made that, we didn't have Skyward Sword at the time,
right.
And they were trying to come up with an origin story, but didn't really. It seems like they didn't really cooperate with Nintendo and tell Nintendo what they were doing beforehand. And then they put it out there, and Nintendo was like, "Wait a minute, no, we could do that better than those guys."
Also,
I just feel like the argument for Minish Cap coming before Skyward Sword, like with the whole establishment of the kingdom, I don't even fully understand because there are various versions of it out there. But basically, they're trying to say that there had to be a Kingdom of Hyrule before Skyward Sword, at least from how I've had someone explain it to me before. And that just makes no sense to me because there's a lot of possibilities for how the Kingdom of Hyrule was established, and the most simplest and what a lot of people, myself included, like to assume was just Link and Zelda founded the kingdom together, along with some people.
I'm actually thinking that the Uka were helped the kingdom like form.
Ooh, the Uka,
and that the idea of because Chat tells us that the Uka are like the ancestors of the Hylians, and he also says that they raised their Sky City after the birth of the Hylia people, right? So I and a lot of people actually interpret this as the birth of the Hylian culture, and that they helped create the actual monarchy and the kingdom, and they actually have a lot of connections with all the races of Hyrule, like all of them. And I do think that they share their technology and knowledge with every single race of the kingdom.
Wow. Okay. I knew there were some crazy theories about the Uka from Twilight Princess, the chicken people, but this is over my pay grade.
The Uka actually helped create the Temple of Time, and there's actually like Uka symbology inside the Temple of Time, and the Dominion Road, which was created by the Uka as well, is inside with statues that can be controlled with it and everything.
I always thought that the raw dominance was just sort of stored there, not that it was. Yeah, go ahead, keep going.
Well, I do think that it was like a gift given to the people of Hyrule, like to the Hylians. Mm-hmm. Like all the different elements, like for example, the claw shots, would be one of the gifts given to one of the races, that being the Sora. Then we have the Skybook given to the Sheikah. We have the Dominion Road given to the Hylians, well, more specifically the royal family. Then I argue that the BMOS and the Armos were created by the the Yucca, since it's specifically found in the Temple of Time, and the only other place that we see them is in the Goron mines. So I do think that they kind of gave those to the Gorons as a means of protection of their mines. So that will be their gift in a way.
And see, it's this type of creativity that I think is why the timeline is so beautiful in its way.
But there's also, and this is mind blowing, and this is all credit to Lorena Historian. There's symbology of the Twilight also in the City in the Sky, and also in the Lakebed Temple, and in other different places of the world. So there's a lot of different connections there as well. So there's a lot of really hidden details in the whole on Twilight Princess alone that I find really, really interesting.
Well, we have all gone through the questions I have laid out. So the question I have now is, does anybody have any closing thoughts for our session? It looks like we've been recording for an hour and 32 minutes. Wow.
Is it really a timeline or is it a time blob?
Time blob. Timey-wimey.
Time blob. These are the real questions.
I'm inclined to say there would need to be a set course of events, that there would need to be a timeline. I don't know if we'll ever learn the truth, but that's the fun in speculation.
The timeline needs an update. That's what I feel.
Yes, we need a timeline 2.0.
3.0 technically.
Or actually, they'll probably call it like timeline 1.2 or something like that, because we've already had a few updates.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd like that. Let's get that in the next update. Next update for Age of Calamity.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I'd say just enjoy it. If you're a timeline person, that's awesome. If it's not for you, that's also awesome. You've got an
and that's when you start going to Twitter.
Enjoy. Yeah.
That's when you go to Twitter and you hate on people. That's great.
I've been avoiding Twitter still. I think I mentioned that last time.
No, don't go on Twitter. It's hell. It's hell. It literally is. Don't.
People are willing to go there.
I just let my Streamlabs and Discord bots post stuff to Twitter for me, and I don't really ever check. Like, I don't browse through my Twitter. I'm not a social media person to begin with, so yeah, don't. If you're not on it now, don't start.
All right then. Well, I think we can wrap up then, guys. Thank you.
Wait, can I wait?
Go ahead.
Can I have the closing statement?
Go ahead, Dr.
Here we go, kids.
He's been waiting.
Of course. I've been waiting in the corner of the room this whole time.
What have you been scheming? Go ahead.
Well, all right, children. I hope you enjoyed this little video, and many kisses from Papa Wiley. I'll see you tonight.